Hey guys! Tonight we begin with the extremely chaotic story of Julius Caesar's assassination, also known as what happens when your coworkers hate you just enough. So before you get comfortable, take a moment, like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. Long before Julius Caesar decided to upgrade Roman politics, the Roman Republic loved telling everyone how healthy and functional it was. Senators boasted that their ancient system of checks and balances kept everything stable. In reality, by the 1st century BCE, the Republic was about as stable as a three-legged table on a slanted floor during an earthquake. But sure, stable. Rome had expanded into a massive empire. Yet, its political system remained the same fragile antique built for a city-state. Imagine running a global corporation using a rule-book designed for a lemonade stand. That was Rome. The Senate kept insisting nothing was wrong while entire provinces caught fire in the background. Corruption everywhere. Bribery, a lifestyle. Political alliances dissolved quicker than a Roman marriage with no dowry involved. Senators switched loyalties so often that even they couldn't keep track of who they were betraying on any given Tuesday. The Republic wasn't dying. It was performing a very dramatic, very unconvincing impression of being alive. Enter Julius Caesar. Charismatic, ambitious, terrifyingly competent, and possessing more political energy than an entire Senate full of men who hadn't seen a battlefield since their last hunting accident. Caesar didn't politely join the system. He crash-landed into it with reforms, popularity, and an ego large enough to be visible from Gaul. To ordinary Romans, he was the hero they didn't know they needed. He lowered debts, handed out land, expanded citizenship, and threw lavish public games because nothing wins hearts like free entertainment. The people adored him so much that the Senate began experiencing symptoms of a previously unknown medical condition called widespread panic. To the Senate, Caesar was a walking red flag. Not because he was dangerous, though he was, but because he was effective. Roman politicians were used to colleagues who achieved very little over long periods of time. Caesar achieved everything over breakfast. He didn't just challenge the old political order. He exposed how flimsy it was. The Republic's institutions weren't collapsing because Caesar attacked them. They were collapsing because Caesar leaned on them slightly. And suddenly, everyone heard cracking sounds. The senators realized something terrifying. Caesar wasn't trying to destroy the Republic. He was simply showing how destroyed it already was. And nothing threatens an old, crumbling system more than a man who proves it's crumbling. Before Julius Caesar became Rome's biggest political problem, he was Rome's biggest overachiever. The kind of guy who doesn't just complete the assignment, but redesigns the rubric, rewrites the syllabus, and wins Teacher of the Year. If Rome had a most likely to accidentally become supreme ruler award, Caesar would have hung it on his wall next to his military trophies. Caesar wasn't born powerful. He built everything himself. Reputation, wealth, alliances, and enemies. Lots of enemies. He climbed the Roman political ladder so aggressively that the ladder filed a workplace complaint. By the time he reached his mid-career, Caesar had everything senators feared in one person. Ambition, intelligence, charisma, military genius, and the ability to make the public love him without even trying. A modern politician would kill for that skill. Senators in Caesar's time literally did. But what truly made Caesar dangerous wasn't just his talent. It was the shocking fact that he delivered results. While most Roman politicians specialized in speeches that said nothing and accomplished even less, Caesar went out, conquered Gaul, wrote a bestseller about it, and sent the Senate updates that basically said, "Still winning. Wish you were here." His military campaigns were so wildly successful that Rome ran out of ways to brag about him. Meanwhile, his soldiers adored him because he shared their hardships, won their battles, and didn't make them do PowerPoint presentations. They marched with him not out of duty, but because he was the kind of commander you'd actually follow into a war zone, or at least into a mildly concerning forest. The problem? No man in Roman history had ever become that popular that quickly. And nothing alarms politicians faster than someone the public likes more than them. Caesar's victories gave him massive wealth, unmatched influence, and legions of loyal soldiers, which from the Senate's perspective was basically a checklist for potential future dictator. The Senate wanted generals who remained humble, controllable, and preferably far away. Caesar was none of these things. He was successful, charismatic, and dangerously close to being unstoppable. By the time Caesar finished conquering Gaul, he didn't just return to Rome with treasure and glory. He returned with momentum, dangerous momentum, the kind of momentum that made senators wake up at night in cold sweats, whispering, "Please, Jupiter, let him retire quietly, or at least move to Spain." But Caesar wasn't retiring. He wasn't slowing down. He was only getting started. And Rome was not ready. By 50 BCE, Julius Caesar had achieved something truly dangerous in Roman politics. He became too successful to ignore and too powerful to control. The Senate tried to contain him the way you might try to contain a tornado with a bedsheet. Caesar had armies, victories, popularity, and ambition, which in Roman political terms is the same as writing, "Please exile or assassinate me" on your forehead. The Senate's solution was simple. Order Caesar to disband his army and return to Rome alone, without the legions that adored him. They essentially said, "Come back unarmed. We promise we won't hurt you." Caesar, being smart, recognized this as the political equivalent of, "Come into the alley. We just want to talk." Meanwhile, Caesar's enemies, Pompey and the Optimates, gathered in Rome, sharpening their legal daggers, salivating at the prospect of prosecuting him the moment he stepped foot in the city. Not because he was guilty of anything. Well, he was, but so was every senator. But because eliminating Caesar would restore their power. They feared him not for his crimes, but because no one looked good standing next to Caesar. So Caesar stood at the edge of the Rubicon River in 49 BCE, staring across the water like a man contemplating whether to press send on a dangerously honest text message. Roman law was clear. A general crossing into Italy with an army was treason. Automatic civil war. Instant chaos. Zero take-backsies. Caesar paused, took in the moment, and then crossed anyway. Legend says he uttered "Alia iacta est." The die is cast. A more accurate translation might be, "Well, here we go." With that single step, Caesar declared open defiance. The Senate panicked. Pompey panicked. Basically everyone except Caesar panicked. And Caesar didn't panic because he had something Rome feared most: confidence backed by competence. As he marched south, cities surrendered instantly. Many welcomed him. Others hid behind curtains, pretending not to be home. Caesar wasn't just crossing a river. He was crossing into political immortality. This moment shattered the illusion that the Republic was in control. Caesar made it clear that if the Senate wanted a fight, he'd give them one, and he would win. The Rubicon wasn't just a river. It was Rome's last warning. And Caesar stepped over it like a man late for his destiny. Once Julius Caesar crossed the Rubicon, the Roman political class collectively entered what historians call severe meltdown mode. Their plan to intimidate Caesar into surrendering failed instantly, mostly because Caesar refused to act like a man who knew he was supposed to lose. Meanwhile, Pompeius Magnus, Pompey the Great, stepped forward as Rome's designated hero, which sounded impressive, except Pompey was no longer the unstoppable general he once was. By this point, Pompey was Rome's version of a retired celebrity trying to make a comeback tour. Pompey had seniority, prestige, and a resume full of conquered continents. But he lacked one crucial thing: momentum. Caesar had just spent 10 years winning battles in Gaul. Pompey had spent the same 10 years winning Senate arguments and avoiding paperwork. These were not equally transferable skills. Still, the Senate placed all its hopes on him. They handed Pompey command of Rome's armies and said, "Fix this." Pompey, realizing he was not emotionally prepared to fight Caesar on short notice, did what any self-respecting military leader would do. He evacuated Rome immediately and told everyone it was part of the strategy. His grand plan: retreat to Greece, gather reinforcements, and fight Caesar from a safe distance. Ideally, a very safe distance. Caesar didn't need to gather reinforcements. His soldiers were already with him, ready to win wars before breakfast. So he marched across Italy like he was strolling through his own backyard, collecting supporters as easily as a medieval influencer. The showdown came at the Battle of Pharsalus in 48 BCE. After Pompey's strategic retreat to Greece, Caesar didn't even pause. His army was already with him, trained, loyal, and ready to win wars before breakfast. So he marched across Italy like it was his personal courtyard, gathering allies as easily as a medieval influencer collects followers. The real showdown came at the Battle of Pharsalus in 48 BCE. Pompey had the numbers, the Senate's backing, and the technically better position. Caesar had experience, adaptability, and troops who had been winning for so long they practically forgot losing was an option. What followed wasn't a clash of equals, more like a live demonstration of what happens when discipline meets indecision. Pompey's forces collapsed, Caesar won, and Pompey fled to Egypt. But instead of safety, Pompey received the worst welcome gift in diplomatic history. The Egyptians killed him and presented his head to Caesar, expecting applause. Caesar did not clap. Pompey wasn't just an enemy, he was an era. His death marked the end of the Senate's illusion of control. Caesar returned to Rome as the undisputed champion of, well, everything. And the Senate, now as powerful as a wet napkin, tried a new political strategy. Pretend they were still in charge while giving Caesar every title he wanted. First, dictator. Then dictator again. Then dictator again. Eventually, they auto-renewed him into dictator for life, which was basically the Roman way of saying, fine, you're king, but don't call yourself king. To Caesar, this made sense. Rome was collapsing, and he thought he needed uninterrupted authority to fix it. But to everyone else, these honors looked like a flashing neon sign. Monarchy incoming. Romans hated kings more than anything. Their entire identity was built on not having one. So when Caesar sat on a golden chair, wore special robes, and had a month named after him, most Romans felt a cold shiver. Then came the infamous Lupercalia scene, when Mark Antony tried placing a crown on Caesar's head in front of a crowd. The people reacted instantly with a very loud, "Nope." Caesar refused the crown twice, but the damage was done. Rome saw it as a test, and Rome did not like the results. Rumors exploded. Caesar wanted to be king. Caesar wanted a monarchy. Caesar wanted everything the Republic feared most. The truth didn't matter. Fear spreads faster than facts. Meanwhile, the Senate's egos were cracking. They loved power but hated competition, and Caesar made them look like they'd been running Rome on autopilot for half a century. Worse, he didn't just overshadow them, he bypassed them. When the Senate argued, Caesar acted. When they stalled, he solved problems. When they criticized, he passed new laws. Rome was working again. But the senators weren't. Even Caesar's mercy terrified them. A forgiven enemy is still an enemy, just one who now feels permanently cornered. And so, the Senate began to view Caesar not as a leader, but as a man drifting dangerously close to Rome's greatest taboo, becoming a king. And when you threaten the Senate's power, their pride, and their identity all at once, well, that's when conspiracies start forming. The Senate was full of overconfident aristocrats who could not handle the fact that Rome's most capable leader wasn't them. They told themselves they were saving the Republic from tyranny, but deep down, many were simply afraid of a future where Caesar succeeded without them. Every major political disaster needs a project manager, and for Caesar's assassination, that job went to Gaius Cassius Longinus, a man powered by principle, ambition, and a lot of personal resentment. If Caesar was the sun, Cassius was the annoyed guy standing in the shade complaining it was too bright. Cassius didn't just dislike Caesar, he detested him. Some of it was ideology, some of it was pride, but a big part of it was jealousy. Cassius believed he was the better general, the better politician, the better everything. History strongly disagreed, but Cassius had one dangerous talent: recruitment. He could walk into a room full of anxious nobles and walk out with volunteers for regime change. Many senators felt overshadowed by Caesar's rising power, and Cassius tapped into their fears like a motivational speaker, just one giving motivational speeches about overthrowing dictators. But Cassius knew the plot needed legitimacy, and for that they needed Brutus. Marcus Junius Brutus was descended from the man who overthrew Rome's last king. His family name practically shouted protector of the Republic. If he joined the conspiracy, the assassins wouldn't look like jealous aristocrats. They would look like heroic defenders of freedom. So Cassius courted Brutus carefully, complimenting his virtue, praising his wisdom, dropping hints that Caesar was becoming a little too regal. Cassius was basically the ancient world's first political influencer, sliding into Brutus messages with, "Hey bro, wanna save Rome?" Brutus was intelligent, idealistic, and philosophical. The kind of man who quoted Plato while others argued about dinner seating. His reputation for virtue was so strong that people assumed he naturally glowed at sunrise. But he carried his ancestors' legacy like a heavy weight. Everywhere he went, people whispered, "Your family saved Rome once, so what about now?" Cassius used that pressure with the subtlety of a hammer. He asked Brutus the one question Brutus couldn't escape. What would your ancestor think of your silence? That was the turning point. Brutus convinced himself this wasn't personal, it was patriotic. A duty, a sacrifice. He believed stopping Caesar would protect the Republic, even though Caesar trusted him deeply. When Brutus joined, everything changed. Hesitant senators suddenly committed. Nervous ones suddenly felt brave. Brutus didn't give the conspiracy strength, he gave it respectability and tragedy. With him, the plot became a historic moment rather than just political violence. Then came the Ides of March, a day the universe practically begged Caesar to avoid. Omens appeared everywhere. Strange storms, odd animal behavior, prophets muttering warnings. One professional soothsayer literally told him, "Beware the Ides of March." The normal reaction would be, "Stay home." Then Caesar's wife, Calpurnia, had a terrifying dream and begged him not to leave the house. Caesar actually listened for a moment. He agreed to skip the Senate meeting. But then another conspirator, Decimus Brutus, arrived and fed Caesar exactly what he wanted to hear. That skipping the meeting would look weak. That the Senate had new honors waiting for him. That he needed to appear strong. And Caesar, who loved public honor, changed his mind. Even on the way, a man tried to give him a written warning describing the conspiracy. Caesar tucked it away to read later. He never did. Everything pointed to danger, yet Caesar kept walking forward, choosing pride over caution, confidence over warnings. When he arrived at the theater of Pompey, the venue named after the enemy he defeated, the symbolism was already ominous. Crowds handed him letters. One of them held the truth. He ignored it. Inside, the conspirators gathered with shaky determination. They had rehearsed the basics but had no idea what to do if things went wrong. Their plan had boldness but zero backup. Caesar entered. The senators rose. The conspirators tightened their grip on their hidden blades. Brutus and Cassius exchanged final glances. The stage was set. The most famous political betrayal in ancient history was seconds away. Caesar took his seat, unaware he was basically walking into the ancient version of a poorly planned escape room. To start the plot, Tullius Cimber stepped forward with dramatic acting skills that would barely pass in a school play. He tugged Caesar's toga to distract him while the other conspirators formed a tight circle. This was the moment Caesar should have looked around and asked, "Why is everyone suddenly standing this close?" But he trusted these men. He had pardoned them, promoted them, even eaten with them. Trust is truly the most dangerous thing in history. The circle tightened, whispers rose, and the room's energy turned weirdly tense, like a pack of wolves pretending to casually stand around a sheep. The meeting wasn't a meeting at all. It was an ambush dressed as politics. The plan was simple: distract Caesar and strike fast. But the conspirators made one huge mistake, assigning the first move to Casca, a man who was not built for this. He panicked, struck poorly, and Caesar reacted instantly, grabbing him and demanding to know what he was doing. Casca yelled for help, and that was the signal. The rest of the conspirators rushed in. The chamber erupted into pure chaos. Chairs tipping, togas tangling, and senators sprinting out faster than Olympic runners. Caesar defended himself as best he could, still the battle-tested general who had survived wars, pirates, and politics. But then everything changed. Through the frenzy, Caesar saw someone he never expected to be part of the attack: Marcus Junius Brutus. Until that point, the attack was shocking but not personal. Brutus was someone Caesar trusted deeply and had treated like a son. Seeing him among the attackers broke something inside Caesar more than anything else happening in that moment. Historians disagree on Caesar's final words, but Et2, Brute, survived because it captures the emotional truth, not anger, just disbelief. After that, Caesar stopped resisting. He covered his head with his toga, part dignity, part exhaustion, part, "I'm done with this meeting." For a man who survived shipwrecks, mutinies, and civil wars, surrendering here showed how deeply the betrayal struck him. When the attack finally ended, the conspirators stepped back, expecting Rome to cheer them like heroes. They rushed out shouting liberty, freedom, imagining applause and celebration. Instead, nothing. No cheering crowds, only confusion and fear. Ordinary Romans liked Caesar. He gave them stability, debt relief, food, and games. Meanwhile, many senators gave long speeches and raised taxes. So when the conspirators proudly announced they had saved Rome, the public responded with the ancient equivalent of, "Who asked for this?" Shops closed. People ran indoors. Rome wasn't celebrating, Rome was bracing for civil war. And then came Caesar's funeral. Mark Antony delivered a speech so dramatic it could sell out a theater. He lifted Caesar's torn toga, pointed at the damage, and turned the entire city against the conspirators without ever raising his voice in anger. In that moment, the assassins realized their biggest mistake. They hadn't saved the Republic. They had created a martyr and opened the door to the Roman Empire. Rome exploded into grief, then fury. Crowds mourned Caesar, then demanded revenge. Statues were covered in flowers, while conspirators hid inside their homes wondering how their Save the Republic plan fell apart faster than a cheap toga in the rain. Instead of restoring order, they had thrown Rome into chaos. The Republic wasn't saved, it was shattered. Into this political vacuum stepped a quiet 19-year-old, Gaius Octavius, Caesar's adopted son. The conspirators didn't take him seriously. They saw a polite, sickly teenager, not a threat. That was their second mistake. Octavian had Caesar's intelligence with none of his mercy. While the conspirators argued over speeches, he gathered allies, secured legions, and moved with cold precision. Mark Antony, Caesar's loyal friend, also wanted revenge and power. Eventually, Antony and Octavian realized they hated the conspirators more than each other. They formed the Second Triumvirate, basically a state-approved revenge squad. Their first mission: hunt down every conspirator. Brutus and Cassius fled east and raised armies. But at the Battle of Philippi, they were completely defeated. Their dream of restoring the Republic ended with them. With the conspirators gone, Antony and Octavian inevitably turned on each other. Rome simply couldn't handle peace. Their rivalry led to another civil war, which Octavian won decisively. Antony and Cleopatra fell, and Octavian returned to Rome as the uncontested ruler. In 27 BCE, he renamed himself Augustus, the first Roman emperor. The Republic was gone. The empire was born. All because a group of senators thought eliminating Caesar would fix everything. Spoiler, it absolutely did not. The scene then shifts hundreds of years later to Tudor London. The first breath you take there hits like a wall, thick with brewing beer, smoke, mud, frying eels, and whatever was dumped into the gutters the night before. Locals barely notice it. Outsiders gag. The sun rises over crooked houses leaning inward like gossiping old women. A milkmaid steps around mysterious puddles. A baker throws open his shutters and yells at a boy chasing a chicken. A woman empties last night's bucket into the street with barely a warning. But despite the mess, London pulses with life. Hawkers shout hot pies, fresh pies, and old clothes, creating chaotic morning music. Carts rumble over stones. Apprentices sprint through alleys dodging dogs, drunks, and runaway pigs. Smoke mixes with river fog, softening the city's rough edges. London isn't pretty, but it's alive. Follow the smell and you reach the fishmongers near the Thames. Their world begins before dawn. Piles of eels, salmon, shellfish, shouting traders and exhausted apprentices. It's loud, wet, slippery, and completely essential to the city's economy. Cats lurk for scraps, gulls swoop overhead, and spectators gather just for the spectacle. By mid-morning, the fresh catch is gone, and the battle resets for tomorrow. Yet even on bright days, a shadow hangs over the streets, the fear of plague. Rumors spread quickly. A strange cough, a sudden collapse. And then comes the figure everyone fears, the plague doctor. Covered in waxed leather, With a long-beaked mask stuffed with herbs, he moves slowly through alleys, his cane tapping stones. Households slam shutters. Children hide. His arrival means danger is close. Watchmen sometimes follow him, marking infected houses and sealing families inside. Treatments are limited: herbs, smoke, and superstition, but plague doctors walk into risk long before others dare. When he leaves a house, the silence he leaves behind is heavy. Some families get hope, others only grief, and the people of Tudor London pray the doctor never returns to their door. If the fishmongers give the city its smell, and the plague doctors give it fear, then the street hawkers give it its heartbeat. From sunrise until the last glimmer of daylight fades, they fill the streets with a constant, unrelenting chorus. These sellers are the city's messengers, entertainers, marketers, and irritants all at once. They sell everything imaginable: food, trinkets, remedies, services, gossip, and they sell it loudly. Every hawker has a signature cry. A pie seller belts out hot pies, hot beef pies, until his voice cracks. A seller of pins and needles chants in a half-singing rhythm. A woman selling lavender sprigs walks slowly, offering a moment of peace to anyone overwhelmed by the city's stench. Children selling matches or apples shout over one another as if volume alone might conjure coins from passing pockets. The effect is a non-stop soundscape, equal parts commerce and chaos. These hawkers move like fish through London's crowded alleys. They must. Street space is a battlefield. Carriages rattle by without slowing. Butchers dump bloodied water into the gutter. Housewives jostle for room. Apprentices sprint past carrying deliveries. A street hawker learns early that hesitation means losing both space and sales. Swift feet and loud lungs are essential survival tools. Many hawkers are women, widows, single mothers, or wives, supplementing their household income. They know which customers are soft-hearted, which are stingy, and which will bargain until the heavens collapse. Others are children, too young for apprenticeships, yet old enough to contribute to family survival. Some are orphans who rely entirely on luck and persistence. In a city with no safety net, selling a basket of goods can mean the difference between eating dinner and going to sleep hungry. But hawkers offer more than products. They offer news. Gossip spreads through their ranks faster than plague through a rat nest. They know which noble lost money gambling, which merchant is about to wed, which tavern watered its ale, and which neighbor's daughter is secretly meeting a tailor's assistant behind the stables. If London has a secret, a hawker heard it first and shouted it second. Crowded markets like Cheapside and Smithfield become theaters where hawkers battle for attention. A skilled seller can make a crowd laugh, cheer, or gasp. A clumsy one is ignored instantly, swallowed by the city's noise. Through them, London breathes. Through them, London talks. And in their cries, shrill, stubborn, and alive, you hear the true pulse of Tudor daily life. If the streets were loud, the taverns were louder. They were the beating social centers of Tudor London, where every class, except the nobility who pretended not to, eventually found its way. Step inside one of these smoky, crooked-beamed alehouses, and you'd immediately understand why the city could never be accused of being dull. The air was thick with the smell of roasted meat, spilled beer, burning tallow, and too many bodies packed into too little space. Ale was the lifeblood of the city. Water was unreliable, often contaminated by sewage or industrial waste, so even children drank weak ale as casually as modern people drink water. Taverns brewed their own, each with a unique flavor ranging from pleasantly earthy to nearly undrinkable. Patrons argued passionately about which establishment served the cleanest ale, though the bar for cleanliness was laughably low. Inside, conversations overlapped like waves. Carters grumbled about taxes. Sailors bragged about storms survived. Housewives compared prices of fish and wool. Actors from the playhouses recited lines loudly in hopes of earning free drinks. Apprentices, forbidden by guild masters to spend their wages on idleness, snuck in anyway, hoping not to be recognized. And in the darkest corners, deals were struck, some honest, some criminal, some merely questionable. Gambling was everywhere. Dice clattered against wooden tables. Cards slapped down with exaggerated confidence. Men lost weeks' wages in minutes, won them back in hours, and lost them again before dawn. Arguments could turn violent quickly. A thrown tankard or a drawn dagger was not uncommon. Tavern keepers kept thick staffs behind the bar, not just for show, but out of daily necessity. Music was another constant. A wandering lute player might trade a ballad for supper. Groups of drunk patrons sang traditional songs so loudly the windows shivered. Even more refined establishments near the Strand employed musicians who tried, usually in vain, to be heard above the rabble. But alehouses were more than entertainment. They were job exchanges, courtrooms without law, rumor mills, marriage markets, political forums, and emotional refuges. A man could mourn, celebrate, rage, confess, or forget, all within the same evening. Women, too, participated more than records admit. Widows owned many taverns, and female brewers were among the most respected tradespeople in London. In these rooms, London revealed itself honestly, noisy, unfiltered, ambitious, and endlessly thirsty. While hawkers filled the streets with noise and taverns filled them with stories, the craftsmen of Tudor London filled them with purpose. Every alley, every courtyard, every market lane echoed with the clatter of tools and the steady rhythm of skilled hands shaping the city's daily life. Carpenters, coopers, blacksmiths, weavers, glovers, and dozens more trades formed the backbone of London's economy, each protected and tightly controlled by powerful guilds. A craftsman's day began early, often before the church bells tolled. Apprentices swept floors thick with sawdust, coal dust, or scraps of leather. Masters inspected tools sharpened the night before. Journeymen, hoping one day to earn the title of master, prepared materials under watchful eyes. Guild rules dictated everything: how long an apprenticeship lasted, what designs were acceptable, what prices could be charged, and who was allowed to sell where. Breaking these rules meant fines, confiscated goods, or, in extreme cases, banishment from the trade entirely. Walk past a blacksmith's forge, and you'd hear the hammers ringing echo long before you saw the glowing iron. Sparks burst like fireflies each time the hammer fell, lighting up the smith's soot-darkened face. Carpenters worked in open sheds, shaping beams for houses that leaned dangerously over the street. Weavers sat hunched over looms, their rhythmic shuttle movements sounding like the heartbeat of London's textile trade. A cooper might be assembling a barrel, his workshop thick with the smell of oak and burning pitch. Craft streets were neighborhoods unto themselves. Shoe Lane for cobblers, Pudding Lane for bakers, Ironmonger Lane for sellers of metalware, Milk Street, Bread Street, and Fish Street Hill, all named quite literally. London did not waste imagination on practical matters. These areas buzzed with constant activity, a choreography of labor performed by thousands who rarely left the boundaries of their trade. But the guild system was more than bureaucracy. It was community. Members supported one another through illness, funerals, apprenticeships, and celebrations. Feast days brought banners, parades, and enough food to embarrass a noble household. Tudor craftsmen revealed something essential. London survived not just on trade and gossip, but on countless hands working tirelessly in workshops. Here, skill was currency and identity. If craftsmen gave London structure, street performers gave it soul. Walk through Cheapside or across London Bridge, and you'd encounter open-air theater, jugglers, minstrels, acrobats, ballad singers, fortune-tellers, and fire-eaters transforming streets into stages. Children watched spellbound, adults paused, and performers earned coins or ridicule. Rogues and pickpockets used the crowds as hunting grounds, working in teams to steal purses, while fortune-tellers offered advice and omens. Storytellers recited sagas, foreign tales, and gossip, acting as newspapers, historians, and comedians all at once. Markets, Smithfield, Cheapside, Leadenhall, Billingsgate, were the city's heart, full of sights, smells, noise, and constant bargaining. Spices, fish, meat, bread, and animals filled every corner. Markets spread news faster than anywhere else, feeding both body and imagination. At night, London changed shape. The shouts of hawkers faded, hammering ceased, and taverns took over. Ale loosened tongues, dice clattered, fights erupted, and the poor huddled for warmth. Rats and cats prowled freely. Yet the city retained its beauty. Moonlight on the Thames, candles in upper windows, and whispered lovers under archways. Tudor London lived around the clock, every street telling a story. In Sparta, girls were claimed by the state at birth. Unlike elsewhere in Greece, a Spartan girl belonged not just to her family, but to the city itself, a living investment in Sparta's future power. Mothers, hardened by the same expectations, offered no lullabies or promises of a gentle childhood. From the moment a Spartan girl was born, she belonged not just to her family, but to the state. In most of Greece, newborn daughters were swaddled, sheltered, and taught early that their place was indoors, unseen and unheard. But in Sparta, the moment she drew breath, the city claimed her. Only the strong survived here. She was to grow into a mother whose body could withstand the pains of childbirth, whose spirit could endure loss, and whose courage could match that of any warrior marching to battle. Strength was not optional, it was a civic duty. Her upbringing reflected this duty. Spartan nurses, renowned across Greece for their toughness, shaped infants with a strict discipline that outsiders often deemed harsh. Babies were bathed in cold water to harden their bodies, fed simple foods to prepare their stomachs for scarcity, and sometimes left to cry, not from cruelty, but to instill resilience. Weak or sickly infants were seen as unlikely to contribute to the city, a sobering reality that contrasted sharply with the sheltered childhoods of girls elsewhere. From her earliest days, a Spartan daughter was taught that weakness was dishonorable, that fear could be trained out, and that her purpose extended far beyond herself. As soon as she could stand, she ran, not lightly or shyly, but with purpose. Running was not a pastime. It was a declaration, barefoot across hard fields, feeling every stone and root beneath her feet. She developed endurance, agility, and focus. Falling behind was punished by public correction, reinforcing the lesson that hesitation could not be tolerated. These long, grueling runs built more than muscle, they forged mental toughness. A Spartan girl learned to push through pain, to treat discomfort as temporary, and to keep going when others might quit. By adolescence, she could outrun most boys her age and nearly all women from other Greek cities. Running was a language Sparta spoke. A strong woman made a strong city. Strength was further honed through wrestling. Girls wrestled openly in the same grounds as boys, learning holds, escapes, and throws under the hot sun, their bodies dusted with sand, hair tied for efficiency rather than beauty. Wrestling wasn't rough brawling. It was a disciplined art designed to teach physical control, endurance, and resilience. Falling, being pinned, or recovering from a throw taught mental fortitude as much as bodily skill. Spartan girls competed fiercely, without shame or apology, and when victorious, they earned pride rather than scorn. Wrestling also forged community bonds. Girls trained together, encouraged one another, and celebrated excellence, not rivalry. The goal was shared mastery, strength for themselves and for the city. Beyond wrestling, the javelin taught girls control from a distance. Light yet deadly in skilled hands, the javelin became a symbol of their training. Girls practiced grip, stance, alignment, and timing with precision. Javelin throwing strengthened the upper body, preparing them for childbirth, while teaching focus and mental clarity. Competitions encouraged continuous improvement. Outsiders were astounded, seeing young women launch javelins farther than many men could. But in Sparta, it was preparation. Courage, strength, and precision belonged to women as much as men. Through running, wrestling, and javelin, Spartan girls became strong, resilient, and disciplined. They learned endurance in body and mind, the value of teamwork, and the pride of skill. By adolescence, their bodies were powerful, their movements efficient, and their confidence unmistakable. They were prepared not just to survive, but to thrive, raise healthy children, and uphold the values of Sparta. This upbringing, harsh and relentless to outsiders, forged more than individual strength. It ensured the city's survival, producing women who were not only strong mothers, but pillars of the state itself. Sparta demanded toughness, resilience, and courage from its daughters from cradle to adulthood, and it got them, shaping a society unlike any other in Greece. Spartan education had layers beyond mere survival, beyond running, wrestling, or throwing javelins. Rhythm, coordination, and controlled movement were equally essential, honed through dance and music. These weren't soft pastimes or decorative accomplishments. They were tools of discipline, unity, and mastery, deeply woven into Spartan life. From early childhood, girls practiced choruses, large, synchronized dances performed at festivals, religious ceremonies, and competitions. Every movement had to be precise, every voice perfectly in tune, every step timed with unwavering stamina. These weren't performances for amusement. They were exercises in endurance, discipline, and collective harmony. The dances were athletic feats, full of leaps, turns, and powerful gestures. Every motion, every kick, sweep, or coordinated step trained muscle and bone. Strength and grace were inseparable. But dance wasn't just physical. It taught girls to act as part of a greater whole. No one could stand out at the expense of the group. Each participant learned to adjust, synchronize, and contribute equally, a lesson that carried into adult life, where loyalty to the city and cohesion with the community mattered above personal comfort. Music complemented the dances. Girls trained with pipes and lyres, singing songs that honored gods, heroes, and Sparta's military legacy. These songs were far from gentle lullabies. They were rallying calls meant to instill courage, pride, and a sense of purpose. At public festivals like the Gymnopedia, girls performed under the gaze of elders, warriors, and visiting foreigners, their voices steady, fearless, and commanding. To outsiders, it seemed shocking. Young women singing boldly, dancing energetically, and moving with athletic precision. But for Sparta, visibility was a mark of strength, not shame. Beyond the body, education sharpened the mind. In most Greek cities, girls were sheltered, rarely educated, and taught to speak softly, if at all. Spartan daughters, however, learned reading, writing, poetry, and even philosophy. Their education was practical. They needed to understand laws, property rights, inheritance, and the responsibilities of managing estates while men were away at war. Ignorance was unacceptable. Debate was encouraged. A Spartan girl was trained to defend her ideas, question assumptions, and speak boldly and clearly. Confidence was not optional. It was expected, drilled into her from childhood. This comprehensive training created women as formidable intellectually as they were physically. Spartan women were famed for their sharp tongues and fearless wit. One Spartan woman even told an Athenian boasting about modesty, "We are the only women who give birth to real men." Such remarks were not mere pride. They expressed deeply rooted civic duty and national identity. Storytelling, poetry, and recitation were integral to this education, teaching memory, rhythm, and emotional control, all essential for public gatherings, ritual observances, and civic leadership. Athletics remained a cornerstone of this upbringing. Running, wrestling, and javelin training developed not just strength but endurance, strategy, and composure. Foot races were long, grueling tests of stamina. Wrestling taught dominance, coordination, and mental resilience. Javelin practice refined focus, precision, and controlled power. Girls learned that falling behind, giving up, or faltering was dishonorable. Competitions were public, and performing before crowds built confidence, courage, and composure under pressure. Victories were celebrated openly, and every achievement reinforced Sparta's expectation that all women embody strength, regardless of family or social status. These festivals and competitions also served as social arenas. Potential partners observed one another at their peak. Swift, fierce, determined, and unashamed. In Sparta, admiration began with excellence, not poetic courtship. Strength and intelligence were attractive, and boldness was expected. Mock abductions or ceremonial displays marked transitions into adulthood, emphasizing courage and preparation, far removed from the timid rituals of Athens. By adulthood, a Spartan woman was unmistakably prepared. Bold, confident, articulate, and physically formidable, she carried the lessons of running, wrestling, javelin, dance, music, and rigorous education in every movement and every word. Marriage did not begin her responsibilities, it was a continuation. Unlike brides elsewhere in Greece, Spartan women married as athletes entered a new arena. Admired for their strength, wit, and courage, and prepared to bear children capable of defending and sustaining the city. They managed households and estates, supervised helot labor, and ensured the survival and prosperity of Sparta itself. To outsiders, Spartan women were shocking, too bold, too free, too visible. But Sparta understood that the strength of a city was measured not only in spears and shields, but in the endurance, courage, and intelligence of its daughters. Every race run, every javelin thrown, every chorus performed, and every argument debated built women who were not hidden behind walls, but standing boldly at the heart of Spartan life, essential to the city's identity and future. It was spoken openly, without hesitation, repeated, and sometimes delivered with blunt honesty. In Sparta, A mother's worth was measured not by silence or obedience, but by the strength she nurtured in her children. A Spartan mother was celebrated for giving birth to sons who would one day march into battle as warriors, and she was equally revered for raising daughters who would continue the same tradition, daughters who would embody the resilience, discipline, and unyielding spirit of their city. The pressure upon her shoulders was immense, yet so was the honor. In Sparta, the fate of the state rested not only on swords and shields but also on the bodies, minds, and courage of its women. Childbirth itself was viewed almost as a warrior's trial, a test of endurance and fortitude. A woman who had run countless miles across the rugged fields, wrestled with fierce opponents, thrown javelins with precision, and trained her body since infancy, was expected to meet the pains of labor with unflinching courage. The pain was not softened, concealed, or whispered away. It was embraced as a mark of strength, a living proof of the virtues Sparta demanded. Tales circulated throughout the city of women rebuking those who cried out too loudly, reminding them that their bodies had been honed for this very challenge, that endurance was bred, not born. But motherhood in Sparta did not confine women to hearth and home. On the contrary, Spartan women held unusual legal and economic powers unseen elsewhere in Greece. They could inherit property, manage sprawling estates, and oversee households that stretched across generations, all while their husbands fought far from the city. Their education had prepared them for independence, for authority, for responsibility. Foreigners often accused Spartan women of wielding too much power, yet for the Spartans themselves, it was simply practical, necessary, and natural. A mother did not cradle her children with softness alone. She instilled fearlessness, loyalty to the state, discipline, and courage. Her lullabies were not delicate whispers of fantasy. They were promises, commitments to raise the next generation in the image of strength she herself embodied. By adulthood, a Spartan woman had become something extraordinary, almost unrecognizable to outsiders. To Athenians, she was loud, brash, and shockingly free. To Corinthians, dangerously persuasive. To poets, she was an anomaly, neither the soft, ornamental figure of domestic imagination, nor the shy, withdrawn maiden seen behind the veils of other cities. But to Sparta she was essential. She was the backbone of the state. Her presence shaped Spartan culture profoundly. She could stand before elders and speak boldly, rebuke a coward, praise a hero, and command respect from soldiers and citizens alike. Her training taught her that courage was not masculine. It was Spartan, and her voice, sharp and unwavering, carried weight. Foreign ambassadors often claimed Spartan women ruled their men. Spartans laughed at such words. They did not rule, they enforced standards. A returning soldier could not hide behind excuses, for mothers were known to greet survivors with the cutting admonition, "Return with your shield or on it." This was not cruelty, but a cultural duty, a reminder that endurance, loyalty, strength, and honor were not optional. They were the currency of Spartan life. Even in everyday existence, Spartan women influenced the city. They managed property, guided households, and shaped the economy. They raised children not with indulgence but with discipline, embedding resilience into the next generation. They were educated, articulate, and assertive. Their athletic training granted health and visibility, making them prominent figures in public life in a way unheard of elsewhere in Greece. Outsiders deemed them scandalous, arrogant, immodest, excessively powerful. But beneath the criticism lay a grudging respect, an acknowledgement that Sparta's strength relied as much on its women as its warriors. Strong mothers gave birth to strong sons and even stronger daughters. Their legacy persisted long after Sparta's armies faded. Their names, deeds, and principles recorded by historians as proof of a society built on discipline, courage, and equality in the pursuit of excellence. Across the Adriatic, a very different kind of nobility claimed its power, older than iron, older even than fortified hilltop settlements. Irian nobility traced their authority not to elections, decrees, or written law, but to bloodlines stretching back to legendary founders, fearless warrior kings, and sea raiders whose stories had been retold beside hearthfires for generations. To be born into an Irian aristocratic clan was to inherit not just a name but a story, a duty, and a claim to rule, and every noble family guarded that claim with almost ritualistic pride. Their homeland, rugged mountains, dense forests, and jagged coastlines facing the Adriatic, shaped them as much as ancestry did. Power in Uria flowed not from cities, of which there were few, but from Gradina. Stone hill forts perched strategically to oversee valleys, trade routes, and rival tribes. Within these walls, extended households thrived. Noble families surrounded by warriors, craftsmen, seers, and servants, each reinforcing the family's dominance. Trade enriched them further. The Adriatic connected Irian nobles to Greek colonies southward and the continental interior northward. Ships arrived carrying amber from the Baltic, tin and iron from the Alps, and luxury goods from Corinth and Athens. The clans that controlled ports and passes controlled wealth, and in Uria wealth equaled influence. Marriages solidified this power. Daughters were prized for alliances, sons trained for the defense of honor. Every feast, ritual, and negotiation revolved around ensuring that bloodlines remained unbroken and unchallenged. Foreign observers marveled at Irian nobles. They were warriors adorned as kings, trading with distant cultures while commanding local tribes. Their authority, though unwritten, was absolute. Obedience followed naturally, for the nobles embodied the identity of the clan itself. Lineage was not just a record of names. It was a living, breathing force, visible in jewelry, burial rites, and every public gathering. A noble family ruled because its ancestors had conquered, negotiated, and survived. Their blood was their throne. To understand Irian nobility, one had to climb. Their power was not on open plains but on rugged heights, where Gradina crowned mountaintops. These hill forts were homes, fortresses, and symbols of dominance. From these vantage points, aristocrats watched trade routes, herds, and rival clans. A Gradina was not a polished palace, but a fortress against wind, war, and time itself. Massive dry stone walls enclosed terraces dotted with rectangular houses, storage pits, smithing workshops, and ceremonial spaces. At the summit stood the noble residence, larger, sturdier, commanding attention. Life within revolved around the household. Warriors training in courtyards, craftsmen producing weapons and jewelry, herdsmen bringing tribute, priests performing sacred rituals. Agradina was also a hub of diplomacy. Foreign traders, Greeks, Etruscans, Venetians, climbed to present goods, secure alliances, and negotiate safe passage. Wine, pottery, textiles traveled upward. Amber, slaves, and metal or traveled downward. Every negotiation reinforced the noble family's central role. Nothing moved through Irian lands without their blessing. The fort's strategic placement served as territorial markers and deterrents. Rival clans saw walls, armed figures, and the sheer height, and thought twice before challenging the noble's claim. Strength declared itself in stone long before swords were drawn. For Irian nobles, Agradina was more than home. It was identity, power, and a legacy carved into the mountain itself. Each wall carried more than just stone. It carried the memory of ancestors who had defended it with spear and shield. Each block symbolized continuity, a lineage of warriors, traders, and rulers stretching back through generations. In Uria, ruling from above was not merely metaphorical, it was literal. The higher you lived in the mountains, the more power you commanded. From these peaks, nobles not only controlled valleys and trade routes but also dominated the flow of wealth and influence. The Adriatic Sea was no simple body of water. It was a glittering highway of opportunity, connecting rugged Irian homelands to the prosperous worlds of Greece, Italy, and the distant north. Control of the coast meant control of goods, riches, and diplomacy. Irian aristocrats mastered this with cunning, skill, and shrewd calculation, impressing even their fiercest rivals. Harbors, tucked between rocky inlets, bustled with activity under watchful eyes. Sleek wooden ships, some Irian, some foreign, loaded and unloaded cargo as chieftains negotiated directly with Greek merchants from Corinth, Apollonia, and Syracuse. The Greeks were often surprised. These were no mere barbarians, as some scribes claimed. Irians understood value, leverage, and the subtle power of scarcity. Amber from distant Baltic lands passed through their hands, precious metals from inland mines, fine livestock, salt, timber, and slaves captured in raids or purchased from neighboring tribes. All exchanged for wine, olive oil, fine textiles, bronze vessels, and decorative armor. Every transaction increased their wealth, prestige, and political clout. Harbor-controlling clans became indispensable, not only to their own people but also to Greek colonies, Etruscan traders, and even early Roman envoys seeking safe passage and reliable trade partners. Yet trade was not always peaceful. Pirates patrolled the Adriatic, some independent, others under the protection or silent approval of Irian nobles. Clans often sheltered pirate crews in exchange for a share of profits, enriching themselves while undermining rival ports. The Greeks complained, but the wealth outweighed the risk. Through the Adriatic, Irian aristocrats transformed from isolated mountain warlords into influential elites. Their ships carrying more than goods, they carried status, connections, and opportunity. A noble family's power, once rooted solely in blood and stone, now stretched across the shimmering blue horizon. Recognition of an Irian noble required no crown or royal robe. Status was communicated through adornment. The gleam of gold, amber, glass, bronze, and imported luxury items, each piece a silent but unmistakable symbol of lineage, wealth, and influence. Jewelry was carefully crafted. Spiral bracelets, heavy torques, delicate earrings, and intricate fibulae that fastened cloaks with both elegance and authority. Some pieces bore astonishing detail, featuring deer, rams, serpents, and other motifs that echoed Aryan spirituality and myth. Wearing such items was not vanity. It was a declaration of identity, power, and heritage. Amber held special significance. Transported across perilous trade routes from distant northern lands, it symbolized both rarity and reach. Noble women often wore polished amber beads, while warriors carried amber talismans into battle or burial. Glass beads imported from Greek and Phoenician workshops added vibrant color, catching sunlight during feasts and ceremonies, visually separating elite from commoner. Bronze mirrors, pins, and other decorative items completed the ensemble, turning the human body into a living display of wealth, diplomacy, and cultural identity. These objects were not casual. They appeared at rituals, feasts, and processions, moments when authority needed to be projected unmistakably. Even enemies recognized the power of such displays. Prestige extended beyond adornment to weapons and armor. Ceremonial helmets, often bronze with elongated shapes and ornate crests, were not mere protection. They were declarations of authority, heirlooms, and symbols of a noble's right to lead. Polished surfaces reflected sunlight, crests proclaimed lineage, and every strike of the hammer echoed generations of battles fought in Aryan mountains and valleys. These helmets were reserved for ceremonial occasions, rituals, and burials, signifying readiness in life and status in death. Shields, greaves, and spears combined practicality with symbolic meaning. Military prowess intertwined with political legitimacy. A noble's identity was inseparable from martial skill. Leadership without the ability to defend one's clan was unthinkable. Greek envoys marveled when Aryan chiefs received them in full warrior regalia, helmets glinting like fire, an unmistakable warning. This is a house of warriors, power inherited, not negotiated. Even in peace, prestige radiated from jewelry, arms, and ancestral legacy. Social display reinforced status. Feasts within hill forts were performances of wealth and authority. Long tables groaned under roasted game, cheese, smoked fish, honey cakes, herbs, and amphorae of imported wine. Hunters presented boar, stag, and bear, animals symbolizing mastery over nature itself. Music and storytelling accompanied the meal. Lyres, flutes, and percussion set rhythmic soundscapes while bards recited heroic tales. These were not entertainment. They were instruments of memory, cementing lineage, reinforcing legitimacy, and ensuring history was spoken aloud, never forgotten or challenged. Ritual drinking was another essential component. Drinking vessels made from bronze, silver, or elaborately carved horn circulated through the hall. To drink from a noble's cup symbolized acceptance, loyalty, or diplomatic recognition. Foreign guests were honored by being offered the best vessels, often decorated with spirals, animal figures, or geometric Aryan motifs. Ceremony blended seamlessly with politics. Alliances were negotiated under the guise of hospitality. Marriages were discussed between bites of roasted meat. Boasts, challenges, and oaths were exchanged before witnesses. Prestige became a performance, and every attendee understood the stakes. Rituals accompanying these feasts added layers of spiritual meaning. Priests invoked the ancestors or mountain gods, offering libations and calling for protection over the clan. Young warriors might be presented with weapons, symbolizing their passage into adulthood. Noble women played crucial roles, too, offering libations, blessing alliances, and managing the household logistics that made such gatherings possible. Foreign observers remarked on the intensity of Irian feasts. What struck the most was not extravagance, but energy, an atmosphere thick with pride, rivalry, and ancestral presence. These gatherings served as the political engine of aristocratic life, binding families to one another through shared ritual and shared spectacle. Among the Irian elite, power wasn't quiet. It was sung, toasted, displayed, and remembered. While warrior chieftains often dominated the stories of Uria, noble women formed the backbone of aristocratic power. Their influence flowed quietly but decisively through every sphere of elite life: inheritance, diplomacy, ritual, household management, and the preservation of lineage. Far from the secluded domestic roles expected in Greek city-states, Irian noble women operated with remarkable visibility and authority. A noble woman's first responsibility was lineage. Aristocratic identity ran through the family tree, and women safeguarded it through marriage alliances, inheritance negotiations, and the raising of heirs. Their marriages were strategic events orchestrated to bind powerful clans together. But unlike in many ancient societies, Irian noble women were not passive participants. Archaeological evidence, lavish jewelry, rich grave goods, and high-status burials indicate that they retained significant personal wealth and autonomy within these unions. Inside the hill forts, noble women managed the elite household, overseeing food stores, laborers, artisans, and the production of textiles, which were central to Irian economy and diplomacy. Skilled weaving was not just domestic craft. It was prestige manufacturing. Finely woven garments were offered as diplomatic gifts, worn during ceremonies or buried with nobles as symbols of status. The women who produced them wielded economic influence that outsiders rarely appreciated. Noble women also played important roles in spiritual life. They participated in ancestral rites, prepared offerings, and sometimes acted as intermediaries between priests and clan members. Their voices carried authority during rituals of fertility, burial, or oath-making, where invoking lineage was essential. To dishonor a noble woman in Uria was to insult her entire clan, living and dead. Foreign traders often remarked on the confidence of Irian women, how they negotiated, supervised, and appeared alongside men during feasts or ceremonies. Their jewelry, often made from gold and amber, announced their status as clearly as weapons announced a man's. Some grave sites even contain weapons buried with noble women, suggesting roles in defense or symbolic participation in the warrior identity of their clans. Most importantly, noble women shaped the next generation of leaders. They raised sons to be warriors and daughters to be political assets, teaching them clan history, expectations, and alliances. The continuity of aristocratic power depended on their wisdom. A clan with a strong matriarch was considered stable. One without her was vulnerable. To the Greeks, Irian noble women seemed bold, extravagant, and unusually free. To Irians, they were indispensable pillars of aristocratic society, keepers of wealth, guardians of tradition, and architects of continuity. If everyday life revealed Aryan noble status through jewelry, armor, and ritual, their burials revealed something far deeper. The worldview of a people who believed prestige should follow a person into eternity. Aristocratic tombs were not mere resting places. They were declarations of power, identity, and spiritual continuity. Each burial mound, stone chamber, or richly furnished grave communicated the same message. This was no ordinary life. Aryan nobles were often interred in tumuli, large earth mounds built to dominate the landscape. Some stood alone, while others formed clusters, marking the cemeteries of powerful clans. These mounds were deliberately conspicuous, visible from far-off valleys or from ships approaching the coast. Their very presence reinforced ancestral claims to territory. Inside the tomb, the grave goods spoke louder than any inscription. Weapons were common even for women. Swords, spears, daggers, and beautifully decorated shields symbolized a family's warrior heritage. These items were often ritually killed, bent, or broken so they could accompany the deceased into the afterlife without being used by the living. Armor, especially the distinctive Aryan bronze helmets, appeared frequently, reminding all who excavated these tombs centuries later that noble identity was inseparable from martial prestige. Yet these burials were not defined by weapons alone. Jewelry made of gold, amber, and imported coral adorned the dead, reflecting the wealth and international connections of Aryan elites. Amber beads gleamed like drops of ancient sunlight. Intricate fibulae fastened ceremonial cloaks. Bronze mirrors and decorated pins emphasized beauty and status, even in death. Ceramic vessels, some locally made, others imported from Corinth, Athens, or Apulia, accompanied the deceased, filled with offerings for the journey beyond. Feasting equipment, drinking cups, and carved wooden bowls hinted at the social life the noble had enjoyed and was expected to continue in the afterlife. For Aryans, prestige did not end with death. It transformed into legacy. Ritual practices added further meaning. Some tombs show evidence of animal sacrifices, libations, or fire rituals performed at the time of burial. These ceremonies involved the entire elite community, reinforcing social cohesion and honoring the ancestors who watched over the hill fort. To outsiders, Aryan burials appeared lavish, even excessive, but to Aryan nobles they were essential. A burial was the final expression of a life lived with honor, wealth, and lineage. It preserved identity not just for the living, but for generations yet to come. By the time Rome set its sights on the Adriatic, the Aryan aristocracy had already carved its legacy into the mountains, the sea, and the memory of every tribe that lived between the Din and the Istrian Peninsula. Their rule was not built on marble or written law. It was built on lineage, metal, ritual, and the unshakable belief that prestige had to be shown, defended, and inherited. And even as their world changed, the echoes of Aryan noble culture continued to shape the region long after their hill forts fell silent. Roman authors wrote about the Aryans with a mixture of frustration, admiration, and fear. They described chieftains who negotiated like seasoned diplomats, warriors who fought with ferocity, and noble women whose status defied Roman expectations. To the Romans, Aryan elites were not primitive barbarians. They were rivals with their own political networks and maritime ambitions. Many Aryan noble families resisted Roman expansion fiercely. Their hill forts became strongholds of defiance. Their warriors fought with the same determination their ancestors had displayed for centuries, and their coastal fleets contested Roman control of the Adriatic. Even when Rome won, it did not erase Aryan aristocratic culture. Instead, it absorbed elements of it. Some Aryan nobles joined Roman ranks, becoming auxiliary commanders or governors of newly incorporated territories. Their sons served as cavalry officers, their daughters married into Romanized families, and their ancestral wealth transformed into landholdings under Roman law. The symbols of their identity, gold jewelry, amber ornaments, ceremonial helmets, continued to appear in local graves well into the Roman era, quietly resisting cultural erasure. What fascinated Roman writers most was the Aryan aristocracy's dual identity. These nobles were both warriors and traders, mountain lords and sea captains, guardians of ancestral rights and participants in Mediterranean commerce. They stood at the crossroads of cultures, blending local traditions with Greek influence and later with Roman administration. Their adaptability was not weakness, it was survival. Even today, archaeological discoveries reveal how deeply their legacy shaped the region. Hill fort ruins still watch over valleys. Tumuli still rise like silent sentinels. Gold spirals and amber beads still shine as brightly as they did in the hands of noble women. The Aryan aristocracy may not have left written chronicles, but they left something more enduring, material proof of a culture where prestige, power, and identity were inseparable. Their legacy did not vanish. It became the foundation upon which later kingdoms and cultures would rise.